Howdy folks, it's Dr. Z returning for VEDA 2014, day 18. It's a beautiful day again. Love this string of beautiful days here. Chilling out on a pretty cool gazebo in town. Today I want to talk about floating, and it's one thing that pharmacists usually get exposed to right whenever they get out of graduation, as I've been exposed to. The concept of floating is, let's say you work at a store that has multiple locations in an area. You go from store to store to store. Sometimes you find one store where you get staffed at, and then you get to work those hours, however long you want, at that one particular store. But if everyone's already happy where they're at, all you can pretty much do is take over sick days, holidays, whatever it may be. I'm going to do a 2-part mini-series about the pros and cons of floating. I'll start off with the good, because there are quite a few good things about floating when you're moving from place to place. One of which is you get exposed to many different cultures. You get exposed to how a lot of people experience shortfalls in therapy, or not enough coverage in their particular area, or even having to pay cash for something that they desperately need but don't have the funds for. You get to see that on a wider scale, more than just at one community at one store. You get to see that when you're moving from place to place to place over a very big area. And one thing with Walgreens is they have districts that encompass a large amount of area. And that includes with Illinois. They have one side where it goes from the St. Louis Metro all the way to the southern tip of the state. And you get to see people from St. Louis Metro versus central southern Illinois versus the very tip, the farthest away from civilization, and how each of those different areas work with different pitfalls in therapy. How fast can they reach a doctor? What kind of relationship do they have with a doctor? How fast are they able to get turnarounds on prior authorization? Some things you get to see that you may not have been able to see in metro areas because they have that better relationship with a doctor. Whereas metropolitan areas, especially around St. Louis, they are a little more removed. They're dealing with a lot more offices. They're not able to develop that relationship and be able to work out something that could be as simple as, hey, can you get this paperwork started? Yeah, sure. If you do that with every single patient at every single office that comes through your door, it can take a lot out of your day, and it takes away from many of your primary duties. Even then, you get to see what is the best way that you could work it out, depending on which area you go to. And then I moved up here to the more central area of Illinois, Springfield area. It's a little bit different. It's sort of a hybrid. You have some relationships with some doctors, but not enough with others. It's a great way to kind of meld into what you want to be as a pharmacist. Another thing you get exposed to when you're floating is the wide variety of medications that are out there. It's more so when you're seeing what kind of manufacturers certain patients prefer, depending on where you go. Especially when it's coming to more populated areas, developed areas. You get to see that they want the newer manufacturer, the newer medication, even more brands than anything. Whereas if you go out into the rural, you want to look for cost. You want to look for things that help improve the bottom line, but still provide that benefit that they need. And then on top of it, you get exposed to, what kinds of drug representatives get to see the doctors in your area, whether it be more higher end brand names that get to sell their wares among the different doctors' offices versus the more cheaper, leaner, more efficient drug reps who are able to meet more and more doctors. On top of that, you get to see a wider amount of therapy go through that door. You get to see a wider amount of therapy going through the doors that you get to see at the different stores you go to. Because there are some therapies that are a lot more old school, but still provide a great benefit. And you would never have been exposed to that if you had stayed at one store. When you go from just store to store to store, you get to see that a lot more often, a lot more predictably than you would at just one store. Other times, you get to see new therapies, new generics that come out a lot faster through multiple stores than you do just one. All it takes is just one doctor who says, yeah, this came out on generic, why don't you dispense that? You get exposed to a lot of different people, a lot of different therapies. One more thing is getting exposed to prescriptions. And that's one of the best benefits I could say about the pros of floating. You get to view a lot of ways to write one word. I can't tell you how many different ways I've seen atorvastatin written. I had one person who just put a statin. I was thinking, so he wants any statin? No, that's his shorthand for atorvastatin. It's like, are you kidding me? He didn't have the time to write that out. On top of it, you get to realize what are the certain mistakes that look-alike, sound-alike drugs that you wouldn't even ever come up with. Some things that you would never have thought of, like Durachesic and Duracell. We were thinking he was writing for a C2, but he was writing for the battery of this person's hearing aid. Don't get me wrong, I'm a poor handwriter, but when I see someone who's even worse than me, I mean, my God. But you get exposed to that and you are able to better translate future prescriptions that walk through that door. I guess one other benefit is you get to see a lot more. You get to see a lot of cool places that you would never have even imagined if you haven't been floating. Like going to Quincy, which is a city out on the western end of Illinois. You hear about the town from, university, oh, I'm from Quincy. But you never expect how beautiful that city is. You know, it's right there, right on the edge of the cliff. The central drag of the town, it's a mix of old school and new school. It's a really cool city to see. The smaller towns that you get to visit, how nice some of these people are. The cool restaurants on top of it, like the newer American restaurants or the fusion Mexican and Irish restaurants that you would never have expected but taste so delicious. The benefit of floating is exposure. You get exposed to a lot of new things that you can't help but gain, because you would have to work at one store for, I would think, 10 years in order to get exposed to the amount of things that I've been exposed to for the last almost year. And sometimes people are exposed to quite a few crazy things at one store. But to me, you get through it a lot faster if you're floating. So tomorrow I'll talk about the cons, but I'll kind of hold that off until then. Beyond that, let me know if you're a floater and what kind of things that you've been exposed to that's been a good thing. Otherwise, like and share my videos, subscribe to my channel. I've been Dr. Z. I'm signing out, and you have a wonderful night.